So, um, just as a quick introduction, my name is Thomas Child. I study behavioral and cognitive neuroscience, and I work in a natural product organic chemistry synthetic lab. I'm also the incoming president for Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And if you care about the war on drugs and ending it, I think you should hear a little bit about the club. So, if you don't already know, in the 1960s and 70s, most interesting drugs were banned as political bludgeon on minorities and the political left. But with the new generation in science and legislation, this is changing pretty rapidly. You should all probably be aware by now that MDMA is inches away from FDA approval in treating PTSD, and other psychedelic medicines are not far behind it. And this early medicalization is the beginning of the end for the war of drugs. And SSDP is a vehicle into the post-war of drugs. We're here to say goodbye to that era and try and build a new one. And our goal is to create positive change, to capitalize on this moment in history, and to build the next generation of leaders in therapy and drug policy and anthropology and all these kind of new disciplines that are going to need to exist. Not that yeah. So, what are our goals? Focusing into like what we can actually do right now on campus, because we can't just like wave a wand and make mushrooms legal in Florida. But what we can do is engage in research and culture. And I'm going to start off by talking about research. The goal of the club is over the next 2 to 5 years to coordinate UF research labs to study psychedelics. The intent of this is to make UF a psychedelic science university and create professional opportunities for ambitious members of SSDP. In this vein, we're also going to be focusing on like disseminating this information. So there's valuable information about these drugs, their safety profiles that should really be disseminated to the public. And other valuable information is like, okay, how do you test your drugs to make sure you're not accidentally killing yourself with fentanyl? SSDP really champions harm reduction and spreading of knowledge in that regard. There's more than just science and knowledge, though. It's really important that we engage with the culture. And we can do it inwardly and we can do it outwardly. So, outwardly, SSDP is doing a lot of networking and connecting to other organizations in the psychedelic sphere, whether it's lifetime psychonauts who have taken hundreds of drugs and use AI to replicate the experiences of a psychedelic, or if it's a group of veterans who are returning from Afghanistan and healing themselves using ayahuasca and other psychedelics. There are these communities out there. They're small, they're looking for people to reach out to them, and we're going to be the ones to do that. Of course, that's the outside world. There's also the inside. We want to nurture community in Gainesville around SSDP. We want to grow and stabilize this organization so that it can serve as a nexus against the war on drugs in our little town and on this campus. And doing that would require us to create a sustainable and ambitious leadership team, which is where you come in, but we'll get there soon. So, just speaking about research a little more. In principle, it's really easy. A psychedelic drug is not special in terms of is it particularly hard to make? Is it particularly difficult to do neuroscience on? The answer is not really. Psychology, yes. Psychology is a little more difficult, but that's already going on at UF. And we will be hosting an event with the researcher leading psilocybin research on campus later this semester. But let's go back into like chemistry and neuroscience. It's not that difficult. Having spoken to relatively senior professors in the School of Pharmacology, really the interest is there. What the professors need is a decent enough group of students to come to them with a project and an idea and the intent to do a PhD on it. I've literally spoken to neuroscience professors who are like, yeah, I'll study psychedelics if you can get me the people to do it. And that's what the point of this club is. So if you're interested in going into psychedelic research at UF, or going into neuroscience research at UF, or going into psychology research, or anything drug related, SSDP is the nexus for you to find your research opportunities. Again, just switching track a little bit into the psychology research, that's also really accessible. There are already research groups at UF who are, for example, polling blue light to DMT nexus to find out really interesting things about the psychedelic community. Speaking of that psychedelic community, there are so many niche subcultures that are available for us to interact with. There's the veterans that I've mentioned before. There's a growing group of Christian psychedelic users. There's a subsect of Mormons that have gone and founded their own splinter church thing and are doing MDMA regularly up in Utah as part of their spiritual practice. There's, of course, psychonaut communities. There's indigenous communities. And we should talk to these people and learn about their way of living, because something that they're practicing with these drugs are going to become mainstream in our culture and are going to influence the way we exist, even in the next 5 years, let alone like the next 15. So building communities and building cross-community understanding right now is very important. And it's really fun too. The psychedelic world is small. I'd say, just kind of like going off of YouTube numbers and like my own guesstimations, I don't think there's more than like 15 or 30,000 people in the world who are following this super closely. So that means when you reach out to someone, they'll respond, and that's amazing. You can't do that if you're, I don't know, a pre-med and you want to get in contact with the right dean of whatever. But you can do that if you're a drug researcher and you want to get in contact with this dude who was making MDMA illegally for 15 years, or this other dude who like discovered something amazing, or a community of Christians who have started integrating psychedelics into their practice. Often reaching out just works, and I recommend you to do it. And I recommend you to do it through SSDP so that you can share the things that you find with other people on campus who care about them. So, we need you. Doing all this is going to take a lot of people, and we're looking for self-driven leaders, researchers, artists, photographers, event coordinators, influencers, journalists, you name it. If you can communicate, if you can get information, if you can make things happen, and you care about drugs, and you care about ending the war and all of its horrible implications, I really recommend you join. The application process is straightforward. You take about 10 to 15 minutes to fill out a Google form, basically just giving us a little information about like who you are, where do you come from, where you are going, why do you care about drugs, what are you interested in doing with SSDP. Then we'll proceed to an interview. But the real cherry on top, the thing that is gonna define our application process, is that you're going to do something. You're going to choose what you do as well. So we're not just going to be like, oh, haha, fuck you, you're the admin person now, and you have to do like a bunch of work that no one wants to. There are going to be people who need to do that. But, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. You choose a project of your choice one semester, and the scope of these can vary wildly, and I'll give some examples in a second. But you just work on that. You make it your thing. You do it semi-autonomously, and you bring it to the club when you're looking for collaborators or people to help, or even just looking to collaborate with other people, like assist other people in their projects. You will run your project for a semester, and then based on how it works out, if you engage well, if the project's high quality, if you communicate well, then we'll integrate that project and your role in that project into the SSDP leadership framework. So just like a quick example, wrong slide. A quick example would be like, okay, there are these veterans out there, and these veterans are like kind of building their own community, but it's not working super well. I've been speaking to them, and like, no, so like literally, I've been speaking to them, and something that they're lacking is like a centralized space for them to gather. There's a few kind of semi things like that where there's enough people on the mailing list, but they haven't found a way to like start talking regularly. So you could be the guy that gets the veterans in America together who care about psychedelics and get them talking like every 2 weeks. And that would be influential. That wouldn't just be influential to you in your personal life and a good experience for you to have, but it would be influential in terms of like, oh, this is actually going to create a nexus for change in the bigger world. And that's an example of a project you could run. There are significant benefits of leadership within SSDP. It's the closest thing to a pre-professional organization in this kind of like ending the war on drugs and psychedelic world. If you look at any of the major NGOs or psychedelic pharmaceutical companies or psychedelic therapy companies, many of the people working in them will have had experience with SSDP. It also demonstrates the soft skills that are really valuable to employers and grad schools, especially since you'd be working on a project. You would be able to take it to them and say, hey, I've got the soft people skills to make sure this all went smoothly. I've got the initiative to like go and do my own thing, and it all worked out really well. And I built a team or I built whatever out of it. And that's something that people are really looking for if you're going into a professional environment. Those soft skills are very important, and participation in a club like SSDP is a way to demonstrate them in a way that is hopefully linked directly with your passion. So what is SSDP going to be doing over the summer? As I'm recording this, it's like Saturday towards the end of spring break. So some of this may be irrelevant in the future, but um, if you're not already a member of SSDP, the way that it's been going down so far is we'll host about 2 GBMs a semester. They're usually about 1 to 2 hours long. They're mostly presentation with a relatively open and engaged audience. Going into the summer, we're going to be continuing those events, but we're also going to be slimming down and focusing a little bit. There's going to be smaller, more frequent and focused discussion groups. Some of them will be directly oriented around club projects. Some of them will just be like, oh, here's an interesting drug I found. Let's talk about the science behind it. Some of them will be, yeah, just more engaged and more interpersonal so that we can like start building a leadership team out of that group. We're going to be focusing heavily on both the cultural outreach, catalyzing research, and building community at UF aspects. In terms of catalyzing research, I'm going to be infiltrating graduate seminars and networking with researchers on campus. I invite you to join me. And we're also going to be building and figuring out the leadership structure of SSDP going forward over the next few years as people pop up and we find roles that they organically fit into so that we can have a cohesive system. Just before we finish, good old Timothy Leary, both ahead of his time and slightly ruining it. But we're going to do better now. Like, we've actually got the foot in the door. We have more of a foot in the door. The door's swinging open and MDMA is going to be medically available soon. So you can make a change and you can do things. What are some of those things you can do within SSDP? You could create a crossover event with a different club on campus that is related to drugs in some way. So like say prison reform or veterans or neuroscience, something like that. You could create your own presentation if there's a topic you care about that you want to share. SSDP is your platform to do that. So if you want to prepare a lecture or a GBM or host an event, we're going to be the platform to facilitate that for you. Of course, you'd have to make it and do it yourself, but we're there to help. Like, what I mean by this is you have to like make the presentation, you have to put the legwork in. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to do this and then not do anything, because then you're just going to fall away and we're going to forget about you. Creating artwork, and artwork's cool. There's like more to drugs than just science and politics and all this shit. And art is a really amazing way to like actually express feelings. And we encourage you to do that within the club. We encourage you to submit it to the club. If you want to, you can even be like, hey, we're going to start a psychedelic art group on campus. Creating advertising material is key. Fundraising, journal clubs, jam sessions, these kind of informal social groups. Partnering with businesses is also a pretty interesting opportunity. Later this semester on April 1st, if you're watching this before April 1st of 2023, we're going to be hosting a rave at Signal. And we can do that because we collaborated with a company, with a little local business. It's pretty easy to do. And if you can talk to a smoke shop, you can talk to a dance floor. give it a shot. You'll be surprised what you might find. We also conducting research is another thing that you can do that would qualify you for a leadership position. Tabling, maintaining the website, event photography, reaching out to wider guests in the psychedelic world, drug testing at festivals, investigative journalism, local politics, or even baking cookies. As long as you're doing something that you care about, and as long as it's contributing to the club and the culture in some way, we're all about that. So just find something that's passionate for you. Find something that isn't a huge burden that's going to be a great stress that's going to ruin your life. But just find something you care about and do it well. And that will put you in really, really good stead because it'll show, oh, this person's great and we want them to be a part of our team going forward. Just wrapping up, the remaining events we have going on this semester. On April 1st, as I mentioned, we have a rave at Signal. Starts at 10 p.m., 18 plus. There's a $10 door fee, and the proceeds will be split between Students for Sensible Drug Policy and the host. I recommend you come. It's going to be a really fun time. On Tuesday, April 11th, we will be hosting psilocybin for eating disorders. Jesse Dallery runs the BHAT Lab. God, I can't remember what that acronym stands for, but he's doing clinical research sponsored by Trip Therapeutics for the clinical effect of psilocybin in treating eating disorders. He's going to be talking about his research with us on Tuesday, April 11th in Wright's G320. Recommend you come. It's going to be an amazing event. There's real psychedelic science already happening at campus, and we're here to expand it. Our final event this semester is going to be psychedelic veteran experiences with Ramon Espinoza Brunez. He is a friend I have made recently through veteran connections. They're easy to get. I can teach you how if you want. And he is essentially going to share some of his experience, some of his thoughts about the psychedelic veteran movement, and it would potentially be the beginning of starting some sort of veteran-focused subgroup within SSDP that could help really catalyze and concentrate and potentially help expand the capacity of veterans for psychedelics movement. So that's everything. I've got a bunch of QR codes up here on the screen. Hopefully I moved my face. I don't know how to record Zoom because I'm a boomer that does chemistry and hasn't touched a computer since 2019 in any meaningful way. But we have our GroupMe link up there if you want to stay in the loop on like things that are very much happening in the moment. Good place to be. If you want to know when our events are happening, good place to be. If you're interested in joining leadership, there should be a link posted somewhere alongside this, but there is also a QR code up in that corner if you desire. And then finally, if you want to visit our website and check out our resources, some of the communities you're able to connect to, mission statements, that sort of thing, website and resources is on the other corner. Finally, I just want to say that the majority of the art in this was made by AI, and that's another community we can tap into. So sign up, get involved, end the war on drugs. I love you. Goodbye.